Good evening, and thank you for joining us. I'm Joseph Grove, your host for the evening. At its core, tonight's event is about whether we move forward as a society that protects animals or allows powerful interests to push us backwards. We are focused on what we've been calling the Factory Farm Bill, a sweeping legislative package now moving through Congress that could roll back some of the most important animal protection laws in the United States. At the center of this effort is the so-called Save Our Bacon Act, which is designed to wipe out California's Proposition 12 and Massachusetts Question 3, laws backed by millions of voters to curb the extreme confinement of farm animals. But as you'll hear tonight, the implications go far beyond those laws. It is not routine policymaking. It's a coordinated rollback of decades of progress. And importantly, this is happening right now. And the window to influence the outcome may be measured in days, not weeks. Tonight's session is designed to give you a clear, no-nonsense understanding of what's actually in this legislation, beyond the headlines, and why it matters for animals, public policy, and democratic governance. It will also show you what you can do tonight, not next week, to help stop it. We want you to leave this briefing informed, equipped, and ready to act, because moments like this are rare, and they are decided by people like you who decide whether to show up, speak out, and apply pressure at exactly the right time. Just a few housekeeping notes. The session will run approximately 45 minutes. You'll see a chat window or a QA button on your screen. Enter your questions there. I'll answer or have answered as many of them as possible during a QA session that'll take us up until the top of the hour. Tomorrow, you'll get an email from us. It will have a link to this recording. If you've missed it, obviously you're not hearing this now, but you'll see it and you'll be able to watch it. You can also share that link with your friends, and perhaps they'll want to take action too. In that email, we'll include links to some reports we've published and other material that will help you be educated about this effort to stop the Factory Farm Bill. Now, some introductions. With us tonight, Wayne Pacelle, the founder and president of Animal Wellness Action and the Center for a Humane Economy. Recognized 7 times as one of the nation's top nonprofit executives, he's a 2-time New York Times best-selling author and has spearheaded more than 1,500 state and 100 federal laws for animal protection. Dr. Jim Keene is with us too. He serves as our Director of Veterinary Services, bringing 30 years of experience, biomedical research, and veterinary care. He is internationally recognized for his courageous whistleblowing on animal abuse at USDA facilities, and he currently holds a visiting fellowship at Harvard's Law School and its animal law program and policy program. Dr. Thomas Poole is our senior veterinarian with a background spanning military and public health service. A Harvard-trained public health expert, he spent 26 years in the U.S. Army, ultimately commanding the Worldwide Army Veterinary Command, and he later served 17 years as a territorial veterinarian for Guam. All right, Wayne, I'm going to turn it over to you. The stakes couldn't be higher. Please walk us through what's unfolding and what we must do starting tonight to stop it.
Well, Joseph, thank you very much. And you introduced my 2 colleagues, Dr. Keene and Dr. Poole, and I'm really pleased to be participating in this webinar with all 3 of you. So thank you for all of your work. And I'm looking forward to hearing from Dr. Poole and Dr. Keene over the next hour. I want to remind you that Animal Wellness Action is a 501c4 organization that works to promote legal policies to stop animal cruelty, and then to see that those laws are enforced. It's an organization that focuses on the protection of wild animals and domesticated animals alike. The Center for Humane Economy is a sister organization, and that organization pushes corporations to do better when it comes to the treatment of animals, seeking reforms in their procurement policies, if it's a food company, seeking better R&D programs, if it's a research and testing company, and other operations that affect the lives of animals. We want all of those practices improved. So as I said, we work on so many issues, but agriculture is really one of the biggest arenas where animals are put to use. The average American consumes 32 land animals a year. We kill 10 billion animals a year for food. And how they are treated matters immensely to them, and it matters to us as organizations that are fighting to make their lives better. And we as a nation went through a terrible trauma in the 1930s. We had the Great Depression in 1929 and into the 30s. We had climatic problems, the Dust Bowl. We had, for all of these reasons of economic forces and climate and weather, we had food scarcity. And we as a nation after that, I think, vowed to see that we would have food security. And at the core of that notion was the idea of productivity. We were going to make agriculture produce immense volumes of food so that we were not going to have people who were hungry. And out of that mentality, which really got revved up over those next couple of decades, factory farming was born in the 1960s. And we took animals who had been domesticated thousands of years ago and were essentially always out in pastures and fields. And we put some species of those animals in windowless buildings and we jammed them together. And in the worst cases, we put them in cages and crates barely larger than their bodies. And we denied the animal essence at that point. And we frustrated the animal's most basic instincts. I've always said that animals and people are different in many ways. Animals within the same species are different. But they are our equals in their capacity to suffer. And to deny them even mobility, one of the most basic instincts, that you're essentially frozen in place. You're immobilized in a cage or a crate barely larger than the animal's body, is a form of mistreatment because of the inability to move weakens your muscles, it weakens your bones, it's frustrating. It denies your instincts and your impulses to engage in social behaviors. If we were stuck in a closet, for our entire life, we would go mad. The worst thing you can do to a prisoner is put him or her in solitary confinement. Animals are sociable. These are animals who live in herds or flocks. And the idea starting in the 1960s that we would imprison these animals in a way that they couldn't even turn around or stand up in a gestation crate, battery cage, or a veal crate was something at odds with any fundamental notion of animal husbandry, proper animal care, and the history of animal agriculture. So I vowed more than a quarter century ago to try to turn this around. And I'm involved in all of the major farm animal ballot initiatives. I helped launch all of those initiatives in Florida, Arizona, Massachusetts, California, that were not radical measures. They were simple measures to give animals built to move an opportunity to move, to get them out of cages and crates that were so small, battery cages where 6 or 8 hens were in a cage the size of a large microwave, a gestation crate that housed a 450-pound sow in a 2-foot by 7-foot metal enclosure that didn't allow her to turn around at all. And not surprisingly, when the public was presented with an opportunity to stop this, they voted in favor of giving the animals more space, more mercy, more decency, more animal care, less factory farming. So Florida voters passed a measure in 2002 to ban gestation crates. 4 years later in Arizona, voters there overwhelmingly passed a measure to ban veal crates and gestation crates. California, 2 years later, added battery cage confinement to the list of prohibited activities on top of the gestation crates and veal crates. And then 8 years after that, Massachusetts voters not only stopped those extreme confinement practices, but said, if you're going to sell eggs, pork, and veal within the state, then you've got to conform to the in-state production standards. So if you're an Iowa farmer or Michigan farmer and you want to sell pork into Massachusetts or eggs into the state, if you're an egg farmer, you've got to allow the animals to move. Not a radical manifesto, just simple, common sense, decent. The voters in Massachusetts, despite a campaign by the National Pork Producers Council and other agribusiness interests, voted 78 to 22 in favor of that measure. That measure passed in 348 of 351 towns. I mean, what does that tell you? That the average American thinks that it is wrong to confine an animal in this extreme way. Then 2 years after that, in 2018, voters passed Prop 12 in California, essentially duplicating the Massachusetts measure. During the latter part of this process in Congress, the National Pork Producers Council tried to say that states can't do the things that we did and that voters decided. They cannot limit these extreme confinement practices or the sale of pork, eggs, or veal that come from those extreme practices. They lost a fight in Congress on the 2014 Farm Bill when they tried to do this. And then they lost in 2018, 4 years later, when the next Farm Bill was passed. And now we have another Farm Bill, which is a big policy bill that relates to commodities and agriculture policy and farmland and conservation of that land and nutrition policy and agricultural research and animal welfare. If we push it onto the agenda, it gets a little tiny sliver of space in that bill. But the NPPC and its surrogate groups and its member groups are again trying to pass laws to forbid the states from taking this sort of action. So at the same time they've been trying in Congress to unwind these animal protection laws, they also have been in the federal courts. NPPC and its surrogates have initiated so many cases that 23 of them have been decided in U.S. district courts, federal appellate courts, and even in the United States Supreme Court. Those groups, those agribusiness companies, have lost 23 straight cases, starting with a loss and concluding with a loss. They lost every single one of them. So remember, they lost 5 of 5 ballot measures. They lost 23 of 23 federal court cases, and they lost the 2 battles on the Farm Bill. Now we have a third battle on the Farm Bill. And while all of that looks grim for them, and we succeeded in holding the line and preserving these laws, you can never rest in animal protection. The National Pork Producers Council is spending tens of billions of dollars, tens of millions, trying to overturn these laws. And their biggest 2 members are Smithfield Foods, which was purchased by a Chinese company in 2013 for billions of dollars. It was the biggest company in the pig sector. Now it's 26% of all US pig production is controlled essentially by China and the Chinese Communist Party. The second biggest pig producer in the United States is JBS, a Brazil-based company that has 14% control of US pig production. 2 foreign-owned companies control 40% of US pig production. Look at the hundreds of other sectors of American agriculture: horticulture, animal agriculture, arboriculture, silviculture. There is no segment of American agriculture of any type that has this level of foreign control. And it just so happens that China, as you'll hear later, is developing high-rise factory farms, 30-story high dystopian structures that house pigs on every level, where pigs never get to see a ray of sunshine, they never get to root in the mud, they never get off of that floor. It's fair to finish on a single floor in a high-rise factory farm like you'd see in New York City or Chicago or some other city with giant high-rises. You don't know what's in there. This happens to be hundreds of thousands single building. This new bill is called the Save Our Bacon Act, and it's been narrowed. Their initial bill was to stop any state from limiting agricultural practices at all. And now what they've done, because there have been no cases where there's a problem for any industry, it's essentially narrowed to pigs. Even the egg industry wanted out of this, because the egg industry, over these 25 years that we've been working on the ballot measures, we've also been talking to major food retailers like Costco and McDonald's and Kroger and Safeway. so many of these major companies said, we're going to only sell cage-free eggs. Many of them said, we're only going to sell crate-free pork. And the nation has been engaging in a shift away from cage-based agriculture to the point where now 46% of all hens are raised outside of extreme cage confinement, and about 46% of sows are outside of gestation crates. California and Massachusetts are the only two states that have laws that restrict the sale of pork and eggs. The egg industry supports those statutes now, but the pork industry doesn't. And that's the group with Smithfield paying the bills and the National Pork Producers Council paying the bills that's trying to overturn democratically decided American elections. More than 10 million Americans voted yes to stop this cage confinement of animals, this complete departure from what animal agriculture looked like for many thousands of years, for about 10,000 years, essentially, for some of these species. And they are exerting all of the influence they can on the Agriculture Committee. And this process has been corrupted by money and lies and misinformation. We have laid all of this out in this report. The Rebranded Eats Act eliminates the nation's most important farm animal welfare laws. You can go to animalwellnessaction.org, and you can go to centerforahumaneeconomy.org to take a look at this report, print it out, read it, send it to friends. But right now, we are facing a moment. Just today, the Agriculture Committee reported the Farm Bill. It's got a fancy name that mentions national security. It's a facade. They said amendments to the bill from the full House had already passed the Agriculture Committee, which is dominated by rural lawmakers in this Republican-controlled House. The Ag Committee passed it, and now it's going to the House floor. Amendments have to be submitted by Wednesday, and they're going to bring it up the week after next, on the week of the 27th. So we have to mobilize to stop this SOB Act, using the information from our report and the information you gleaned tonight. This whole concept of the federal government, which has no humane treatment standards for farm animals at all, on the farm. There's a Humane Slaughter Act, which is very weak. It excludes poultry. It's supposed to render cattle and pigs insensible to pain before slaughtering them. It's not been enforced very well. There's an 1872 law called the 28-hour law that says you can't drive animals or you can't transport them on a vehicle for more than 28 hours straight. That's also poorly enforced. And again, it's not much of a standard at all, with no humane treatment standards on the actual vehicle. So those are basically the only laws we have for transportation and slaughter. We have no standards on the farm, where the animals spend the vast majority of their lives. I mean, transport hopefully is 24, 48 hours at most, 72 hours. Slaughter, we hope, is just a few minutes. And isn't a protracted process of dismembering the animal alive. So for the 12 to 18 months that a laying hen is alive, for the 3 or 4 years that a breeding sow is alive, the least we can do is give them decent treatment. And when I think of factory farming, I think of this idea that I mentioned that, okay, we're going to value production. I mean, it was an innovation to put animals in cages and have a giant building and have all these efficiencies and produce all this meat or this many eggs. It was a human innovation, but animals were at the center of it, and they were denied the most basic humane sensibilities, acts of kindness. So it was a humane innovation detached from conscience. What we seek at Animal Wellness Action, the Center for a Humane Economy, is human innovation attached to conscience. That we want to see all of the good things in life, but not torment animals in the process. And we are smart enough to figure this out, whether it's in wildlife management or agriculture or science or spectator sports or whatever it may be. we don't need to torment animals to succeed as a civilization. And factory farming is a broad-based threat. Voters had all the right instincts, and now you have just a handful of lawmakers driving this bus, if you will. So I'm pleased to share the small stage tonight with Dr. Tom Poole and Dr. Jim Keene. Dr. Poole, as Joseph Grove, my colleague, mentioned, served our United States in the military. He was a colonel. He headed the U.S. Army Veterinary Command, which is a tri-service command. He's a rancher from southwest Oklahoma. He's a veterinarian, a master's in public health, worked for the government of Guam as its top veterinarian. He's a man steeped in agriculture. And Tom, you and I, look at agriculture differently, not very differently, a little differently, but coming from our different backgrounds, me from New England, you from Comanche County and Oklahoma, I think we both have the same reaction to seeing an animal like a sow in a crate where she can't move, and we're appalled by it.
Thank you, Wayne. Yes, I'm really only a vegetarian when I'm traveling with Wayne, but otherwise, I enjoy eating animals. My family has been raising them for several generations there in Oklahoma, but we're absolutely dedicated to raising them humanely. For example, we switched, a couple of decades back to polled breeds, that is, breeds that don't have horns naturally, so we didn't have to go through the painful and fairly cruel dehorning operation. So I'm just completely dedicated my whole life to it. And I think most veterinarians have. And you would almost have to spend those 8 minimum grueling years to become a veterinarian. And I really feel sorry for the swine veterinarians who are largely employed by and have to follow the rules of China and Brazil through what I consider to be their wholly owned subsidiary, the National Pork Producers Council. And so, I just as an aside, they changed it once I started talking about it. But the first page of the American Association of Swine Veterinarians used to be a suicide prevention page. Before you could even get into the rest of the organization, they wanted you to make sure that you talk to somebody if you're feeling like killing yourself. Because I think most swine veterinarians, a lot of them do feel that way, because they are seeing every day animals being tortured. I don't think that's too strong a word. In these factory farms, they're not even farms really. They're buildings, these high-rise buildings. They're very efficient. You really can't compete with them. The family farms, small operators can't compete with the efficiency of raising, hundreds, thousands of sows in these tortured conditions. And I'm going to show you pictures in just a moment of sort of what this looks like. And so some of these states have tried to do something about this. And one of them was Proposition 12 in California that Pork Producers Council, which is basically China and Brazil, have been fighting so hard. And as Wayne mentioned, they have lost everywhere, including the Supreme Court. And so they gave up and said, okay, well, let's see if we can buy, a law that finesses all of those court cases. And that's what they're trying to do right now. But Prop 12 didn't eliminate these gestation crates that Wayne was talking about, and I'll show you in a minute. It just asked them to be slightly larger. Instead of 2 feet by 7 feet, asked them to be a little bit larger so that the sow could actually stand up and turn around. That's it. That's all that was required, and they're just fighting that as hard as they can. And so that's what this, and Save Our Bacon, there was never a more appropriately abbreviated bill than the SOB bill, which is what this is. I just think it's horrible. And people just don't know about it. And we just desperately need people to be contacting the representatives and say, to me, anybody that would support this is either ignorant or a traitor. And neither one of those, anything to brag about if you're a representative, because this is bad for America, bad for the animals, bad for American farmers. 29 states have already outlawed to some degree or another, foreign ownership of agricultural land. And this SOB Act would go so far. They already have 40% of our pork industry. it's going to be very difficult to compete against something like this. It's like a mom and pop store next to Walmart. The economics of scale just make it almost impossible to compete. And it's so cruel. And that's why I hope that we can enlist your aid in trying to get this turned around. This is really the 11th hour. We have to do something immediately on this. Ryan, if you could put up the slides, the first one, please. This shows what these gestation crates look like. Now, these sows go in there when they're about 6 months of age, and she's never going to leave. She's going to be artificially inseminated, get pregnant, and in basically 120 days, slightly less, she's going to have her piglets, and as soon as they are weaned, in another week, she's going to be artificially inseminated and get pregnant again, and she's going to spend the rest of her life right there, 3 or 4 years, and she's going to get much bigger, and she's going to fill that thing up to where she can't turn around, often can't stand up. And I've been in these facilities. The noise is deafening. These sows, when they're awake, they're screaming, they're miserable, they're surrounded by other sows that are screaming. I would want to kill myself too if I had to go to work in one of these things every day. They're just horrific. You can't believe it until you experience it. This is imagine spending your entire life there from age 6 months to death. You never leave there, can't turn around, can't see the other pigs around you. You can hear everything, can't see anything. Next slide, please, Ryan. You'll see some of the, what it would be like sitting, spending your whole life in an airline chair or in a coffin or something the size of a refrigerator. There's no need for it. There's no reason for it. And you can see the sort of things that happen. You get these decubital ulcers where the sows are rubbing on these cage bars, and they end up with these ulcers, and they have these weird bar biting stereotype where they sit there and chew on the bars, break their teeth. They really are just insane. They're driven insane by these practices. And then they often get to this dog sitting thing where they lose the ability to stand up. They're in pain, and they spend the rest of their lives in pain. You just would have to see it to really believe how cruel it is, and also how unnecessary it is. So many small farmers have already switched and have made that change. And if this bill passes, the money they spent making the change will have all been lost. And these high-rise factory farms, Jim will show you a picture of that in a moment, those will replace the small farmers. And I really think this is a strategic issue also, in that they already own 40%, and they would like to own all of our pork industry, and we just can't do that.
Well, Tom, thank you for that very sobering presentation. And I just want to say that, I am just delighted to have you as a colleague. You've added so much understanding for all of us about agriculture. And the fact that you come from rural Oklahoma and are a rancher and a farmer and a colonel in the military, I don't think you're going to be written off as some vegan fanatic from Greenwich Village, right? And hear what Dr. Tom Poole, rancher from rural Oklahoma, said. This is not agriculture. This is torture. This is what we're seeing. The coalition that has formed to fight this SOB looks like America. And those votes that were landslide votes in favor look like America. This is an extreme practice. And I'm also, just so glad to have my colleague, Dr. Jim Keene. He's a PhD and epidemiologist. He's also has a DVM. He's a veterinarian, worked for the U.S. Department of Agriculture, lived for many years on his family's farm in South Dakota that was a homestead farm from the 19th century. He has been involved in agricultural research throughout much of his life. Jim, I know you see this issue in the same way that Dr. Poole and I do, and we welcome your thoughts.
Yeah, I certainly view it the same way that you and Tom do, and there's so many things wrong with the Save Our Bacon Act. The SOB part is okay, that fits, but even the name is a misnomer because bacon is actually not part of the Prop 12. It has to be fresh cut beef. Even the name is a lie, you could say. So So what are the consequences of this Save Our Bacon Act if it passes the House and passes the Senate, becomes law? I think as Dr. Poole alluded to it, and Wayne as well, there's it can get worse than what it is right now. Ryan, could I have the next slide, please? So this is what happened in China all within about the past 5 years. This is a couple of years ago, there's more than 2,000 of these high-rise swine buildings, and they vary in size, but basically on one end of the building on a given floor, the little piglets are born, and they kind of move along the length of the building until at the end they're at slaughter weight after about 6 months, and then they leave the building. The ones that are being slaughtered, of course, the sows, just as Tom said, they get pregnant, get inseminated multiple times until they basically wear out. So because if the SOB Act passes and the minimal animal welfare laws that are in place to protect poultry and swine in particular, there'll almost for sure be a race to the bottom. And this is one manifestation of the race to the bottom, where it's 100% meat production or pork production and 0% welfare. So it actually can get worse if this law passes, and I think it probably will because of the market dominance that China has in our own country. In fact, the U.S. and China are the only countries in the whole world that use gestation crates on a large scale. Most of the other countries of the world have limited their use or made it illegal or in the process of that. So China and the U.S. are the real outliers in this, but China could definitely make it worse than what it is now if the SOB Act passes. Now the next slide, please, Ryan. So California and Massachusetts, which is question 3, they're the two states that have banned gestation crate use within their swine industry, but also ban retail sales of pork raised using gestation crates. But there are 9 other states that have banned gestation crates, but don't ban the retail sale of pork raised from other states. So that's the only difference. Actually Ohio just came on board last year. That's the most recent states. So the trend is the first state was Florida in 2000 or 2002, and there's new states are popping on, and including Ohio and Michigan are big ag states with significant swine population. So I think this trend is going to continue. So California and Massachusetts are not alone in wanting to provide better welfare, for their pregnant sows. Okay, next slide, please, Ryan. So here's what Wayne had mentioned, and Dr. Poole mentioned as well. The WH Group is the largest swine producer in the world. They own Smithfield, bought it in 2013, I believe, for $5 billion. And so they own there's about 6 million sows in the U.S. They own 1/6 of about 1 million sows. So they're by far the biggest, both the slaughter of pork as well as the rearing of pork, from the breeding sows. And JBS is the world's largest overall meat processing company, and 14% of the U.S. market. If you look at the history of JBS, it's the company. It's run by 2 brothers, and they have multiple levels of corruption. They're not exactly a model citizen in the corporate world. So those are kind of the leaders, and because of the market influence they have, I imagine that they're the major force behind the National Pork Producers Council because of their market power in promoting the SOB Act. Okay, next slide. I think maybe the last slide is the last one. So on the good side, I mentioned several states have banned, 11 states have banned use of swine gestation crates within their territories. But there's also many large food companies have pledged to ban pork derived from gestation crated sows. And this is largely a reflection of consumer demand or their corporate boards. The only issue with a lot of these is they tend to delay their implementation, and so they need pressure from consumers like you to stick to their pledges and keep to their promises. So I think that this is a desperate, this SOB Act is a desperate move on the side of the pork industry to stop all of these forces. Okay. Thank you, Wayne. Thank you, Tom.
Jim, thank you very much. And Jim also, in addition to being with Tom and then Dr. Svetlana Fagan, who is also a primary author of this report, Jim also, Dr. Keene, did a report about the mink industry. And this farm bill has another, ugly little provision that was inserted. It seeks to repeal a law that I worked to pass 30 years ago, dating myself, that forbids the USDA expenditures to promote U.S. produced mink pelts overseas, principally by taking advertising to promote U.S. produced mink coats, and by conducting foreign fashion shows, mainly in China, to promote mink purchases in luxury elite settings in the CCP. So 30 years ago, the Congress said, no, we're not going to spend your precious tax dollars promoting mink coats in China. That has endured until the chairman of the Agriculture Committee, Glenn Thompson, who's the guy pushing the repeal of our state laws, he's now supporting the repeal of our federal laws to protect animals. I just want to show you a couple of quick slides on the mink issue to tell you how awful this factory farming bill is. And let me just say again, these are wild animals. Mink are wild animals. They're solitary animals, and they are aggressive animals. They're put in a group housing situation, and they attack each other. I had a former colleague who grew up on a mink farm on the Idaho-Utah line. He said his grandfather had the facility and the family, and his job when he was a kid was to walk down the line of cages and pull out the dead mink every morning that had been killed through cannibalism. Next slide. This is an industry that not only is unbelievably inhumane because these are wild, semi-aquatic animals who live in solitary animals who live group housed in cages where they never have access to water, and then they attack each other in the cages. It's also, turns out, perhaps because they're solitary and they don't have the immunological defenses that many other animals have, they become viral mixing bowls. They catch diseases from people, the diseases mutate and they spill them back to people. And all of these countries in green had major outbreaks of SARS-CoV-2, that's COVID-19, that paralleled the onset of the human pandemic that killed a couple million people and that really disrupted our economy and our lives for such a long time. Next slide, please. The industry is small and it's unprofitable because consumers don't want mink coats anymore. They understand that there are alternatives. They understand that it's cruelty to animals, whether the animals are trapped with steel jaw-like traps or snares or conveyor traps, or they're trapped in a cage and then killed by electrocution or manual neck breaking. But you can see these are the numbers of these are the pelt price values, the vertical blue lines, and the one going across the dotted line is the break-even point for the mink farmers. So for the last 10 years or so, the mink farmers aren't making enough money to break even. And in the last year, they grossed $28 million, and they've been under that line. So they're losing money. They're providing no net income to the United States. It's just a bunch of economic, a lot of spending and costs that yield profits for nobody. Next slide, if you will. And that's why the numbers of mink being killed and raised is declining, because you can't make a living because people don't want your product. And you can see that we went from 3.5 or 3.7 million mink in 2013 and 14 down now below 1 million to 771,000, the lowest ever number recorded. Again, why? Because people don't want it. But here comes the government spending your tax dollars to try to promote this to tiny little slivers of markets in little far off places, thousands of miles away. Is that what you want your government to do? When we have a $39 trillion debt, you want to spend money on a dying industry that makes almost no money, that has the tiniest footprint, the footprint of an ant in the United States, and we're going to throw millions of dollars at them. That's in the Farm Bill too. Meanwhile, we have bills like the SAFE Act to stop horse slaughter that have 228 co-sponsors in the House and bipartisan support in the Senate, and they omit that provision from the Farm Bill, even though lawmakers requested its inclusion. And on the FIGHT Act to combat dogfighting and cockfighting, the chairman of the committee, the guy who put in the Mink provision and who put in the SOB Act to cause continued harm to these animals, he doesn't even feel it's important to have stronger statutes to combat dogfighting and cockfighting, even though the National Sheriff's Association supports it. The Alabama sheriffs, the Idaho sheriffs, the Michigan sheriffs, the Arizona sheriffs from all over the United States, the National District Attorneys Association, even the egg industry supports it, and the poultry industry support it because of the disease spread from the cockfighting birds. This could not be more corrupt factory farming bill, a corrupt factory farm bill. It is the product of political donations and maneuvering and machinations to harm animals from people who just don't care. They don't care about these animals. They don't care if a sow's in a crate. They don't care if a mink is being cannibalized. They don't care about dog fighting. They don't care about cockfighting. But we do. And the whole history of our country is a history of overcoming terrible extreme abuses. And that's why we have this webinar tonight, to ask you to help us to stop this corruption, to stop this moral rot in the Farm Bill. So I hope you'll join us. And Joseph, I don't know if we have any time for questions, or if we're taking questions, or if we should have some dialogue between the three of us, but let me turn it back to you for a moment.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. We have several questions. Let me bring them up and we'll begin to ask them. If you're still entering questions live into the question box, I'll do my best to toggle back and forth and add yours as we go. So when is the bill going to be voted on, Wayne? And is that the last step in this bill being passed?
Yeah, great question. Thank you. That's really important orientation for all of us trying to exert pressure. So our Congress has two chambers, the House and the Senate. The bill is active now in the House. So as I mentioned earlier, if you were part of that portion of the call, today, the House Agriculture Committee reported its bill to the Rules Committee, which sets the rules for how the bill is going to be considered on the floor of the House. So amendments need to be submitted by lawmakers by Wednesday in order to be considered. And then the Rules Committee says, this one doesn't make it, this one doesn't make it. It's political reasons, not whether the bill is relevant or germane, as it's called in parliamentary procedure. So it'll be very important for our amendment to be ruled in order so we can have a vote on it, so all 435 members of the House can debate it and then decide whether it's included or not. The chairman of the committee, the guy who wants to override 10 million votes, don't think for a second that he wants to stymie debate. He wants to pass this without the House even having an opportunity to have a vote on the issue. I mean, if you can overturn in a snap the votes of 10 million Americans, you're going to easily try to sidestep the votes of 435 U.S. representatives, but we will fight to get it considered. Once the amendments are decided, which ones will allowed to be offered, the following week, so the week of April 27th, the bill should come up. Now, the leadership, if they think that the bill doesn't have enough votes may delay it, which is what happened during the prior Congress. We're now in the 119th Congress, every two-year Congress. So we've been doing this for 240 years or so in our republic, 119 times 2. And then the debate will happen on the floor of the House, and the amendments will be offered. And then after the amendments are offered, there'll be an up or down vote on the Farm Bill. So just to be clear, Animal Wellness Action, the Center for Humane Economy, opposed the whole horrible bill. There's one good provision in it to ban greyhound racing. We supported that, but the overall bill is so god-awful and ghastly and rotten that we oppose it. The mink farm provision, the SOB Act, the absence of the horse slaughter provision. But on the floor, we can do our best to correct that. So that's what we're going to try to do. And that's why, please contact your representative. That's urgent. But while you're at it, contact your 2 U.S. senators, because if it passes the House, then it's going to go to the Senate. And it's important to bank your objections to the bill and to stipulate that you care about the animals and that you're specifically opposed to the SOB Act. Used to be called the EATS Act. Now it's called the SOB Act. We so badly tarnished it that they had to change its name.
All right. Well, congratulations on making that happen, Wayne. Ryan, my producer, has just put up a QR code. If you have your phone handy, you can scan it and be immediately connected to our action alert. Or you can go follow the link you say. Just enter bit.ly, and we've named the link No SOB Act. You can go there. It takes just a minute or two. Enter your name, your email address, and the system figures out who your legislators are. It even suggests an email version you can send to them. It's fast, it's easy, and believe me, when legislators hear from you, it really makes a difference. I'll ask our veterinarians this question. Talk about the potential implication relative to antibiotics. If you have all of these animals in this confined space, does that increase the number of antibiotics they need? And if so, is there a potential human harm from all of that medicine?
Well, I'm happy to take that one. Yes, I think people don't realize, it always sort of bothers me when I see the physicians trying to limit the use of antibiotics. And I think it's only because you don't understand how many megatons of antibiotics are being used in animal agriculture. And it's really appalling. And we simply have to do something about it, or we're all going to run out of antibiotics. We've pretty much, mined the cave for everything that there is. There's just very few new antibiotics coming along. And so, yes, what we're doing to these pigs, absolutely, as I showed you in those pictures, the abscesses, anytime you can find lots of animals or any kind of creatures like that, you greatly increase the transmission of disease and the required use then of more antibiotics. So it's an excellent question, and everything about this is going to make that problem worse.
All right. Thank you. Wayne, a user asked, what was the name of the mink bill from 30 years ago? Do you recall that? Any background on that 30-year ago event?
Well, actually, it started off with what's called a funding prohibition. So the agriculture spending bill. So every year the Congress is supposed to pass spending bills to fund the operations of government, right? We've got a multi-trillion-dollar government spend program now. It's been going up and up and up, regardless of whether it's Democrats or Republicans. It's going north. And one of those bills funds the Department of Agriculture. And within the Department of Agriculture, they had this program called the Market Promotion Program, which is designed to promote U.S. produced agricultural goods overseas. So I came up with the idea, and we built a coalition after we learned that the mink industry was getting millions of dollars for these foreign fashion shows. And we talked to our allies in Congress, and they offered an amendment on the floor when we actually used to have more debates and more votes on issues. And we won a commanding vote in the House and a commanding vote in the Senate to prohibit this subsidy. That was renewed for the next couple of years, and then it was turned into permanent law. So it didn't quite have a name like the SOB Act or like the FIGHT Act, because it started as a funding limitation. It was basically a Mink funding limitation for overseas marketing.
All right, very good. How did foreign groups gain so much power in the U.S. pork markets or markets generally? Is it simply a matter of having great lobbyists? How did we get here?
Well, I mean, maybe one of our agricultural veterinarians wants to answer, but as a general matter, a lot of big companies, they're multinational companies, and their footprint is no longer just in the U.S. or no longer just in China or Brazil. They're operating globally, and the United States, is a breadbasket of the world. We exist at a latitude that allows a great deal of agriculture. We've got a country that's pretty wide, east to west, at that latitude where a lot of agriculture can occur. And I think that when you think about industrialized agriculture and all of the aggregating of animals on these factory farms, it produces enormous volumes of waste. I mean, if you're Brazil or China and you can have the factory farms in the United States, you can reap the profits, bring them back home, but then have the United States deal with all the waste. We have 340 million Americans, and our waste is treated, and it's denuded of its toxic properties.
Some folks are asking about farrowing crates, right? Now, before I started working here, I wasn't sure of the difference. What is the difference between a gestation crate and a farrowing crate?
I personally think that there's a place for farrowing crates, and that is just before the sow is going to give birth to her piglets, you move her into a farrowing crate. But that's a very temporary measure. It keeps her from, or reduces the chance that she squashes, her own baby piglets and that sort of thing. But the farrowing crate, in my mind, is not a huge issue, and it's not part of this SOB thing. This is about gestation. This is about those sows spending their entire lives in that one little crate, except for when she's moved to a farrowing crate for just, a few days, short period of time. So that's the difference.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for that, Dr. Keene. And I believe, let me double check. Is there anything folks can do, Wayne, beyond contacting their legislators? The Center for Humane Economy works very hard to pressure businesses to do better by animals. Is there anything beyond the governmental approach we can do?
Yes. I mean, certainly we should be conscious consumers. We should be making choices in the marketplace that reflect our values and our sensibilities. That is so important. Obviously, supporting us financially so that we can hire top lobbyists, that we can have outstanding agricultural veterinarians, we can have lawyers and campaigners. Certainly, you can write a letter to the editor. You can talk to organizations that you may be a member of to seek their support for this. You can spread the word on social media, get our report, spread it around, take our alerts, spread it around in social media. We've got to create a firestorm of protest. I mean, we can't be passive. We can't wait for someone else to do this. We have to do it ourselves.
All right, very good. You can follow animalwellnessaction.org on Facebook, also the center. One of the participants asked whether we had a social media toolkit. The easiest way you can support us on social media is to follow us, hitting like or love or whatever the options are, helps the algorithm show people are interested in this, and that increases the visibility of our posts. And certainly that's even more so the case when you hit share. And we had another good idea, Wayne, a couple of them from participants. We've got a really good group tonight. One of them is that we make available for sharing the slides from today. So I'll ask after this event that we bundle the slides, put them in a Dropbox folder. We can include that link, if you like, in our outbound email on this tomorrow. And then also a list of talking points. Perhaps we can develop that and share it with our users. Just here are the 10 things you can say to family and friends to show them why this is something to be opposed and how they can oppose it. We're almost to the top of the hour. I'll turn it over to you, Wayne, and our guests before I close this out.
Well, thank you, Joseph, and thanks everybody for listening in. As I said, we can't be bystanders in the face of these immense threats that animals face. We have to speak up for animals who are victims of frankly, soulless corporations and corrupt politicians. I hate to put it so bluntly. Animals should not be put in cages and immobilized for years on end. It is a disgrace. It is wrong. And the fact that these people who are so miserly toward the animals who are at the center of the business, the pork industry is making money from these animals. They would not be making a dime but for the animals. And they don't have the decency to give them space to move around. They're trying to wipe out the few laws that exist in our nation. I mean, it makes me sick to my stomach. And my sickness and my anger get channeled into advocacy. That's been my psychological ability for a long time. And I ask you to do the same. We can't win without you. We can't fight these people off without you. We've done it before, the prior farm bills, all the ballot measure wins, all the court cases, but this is our latest challenge. Our army has to win this battle. So grab your gun, grab your musket, grab your sword, and fight with us. Fight with us.
All right. Thank you, Wayne. Dr. Keene, Dr. Poole, any final words? That's a hard question to ask you, isn't it? Any final words, Dr. Poole?
No, Wayne did a great job. I just saw a question there that I typed in the answer about, are farrowing crates better than having them out in pens? I mean, yes, and no. I love the animals to be able to get out and roam around, that sort of thing, but you are going to have more losses from the piglets. And I just don't think that the farrowing crates is the big issue. I just don't think that's what we need to worry about right now. The gestation crates are so massively cruel and so bad for farming in America in every way in the world. That's what we really have to focus on, and that's what we have to fight today.
Dr. Keene?
I would second what Dr. Poole said.
All right. Very good. Wayne, thank you. Dr. Keene, Dr. Poole, thank you so much. You didn't see him, but Ryan was bringing up the slides. He made all of this work. Ryan, thank you. And certainly we want to thank our sponsor, Claudia Miller. You've been watching tonight a Claudia Miller Ignite webinar on animal welfare. Look for our follow-up email tomorrow and stay tuned for details on the next webinar in this series. You can find us on Facebook, X, LinkedIn, Instagram, and we look forward to engaging with you there and in your inbox as we work together to make a better world for animals. Because, as we say, helping animals helps us all. On behalf of Wayne and the rest of us, thank you and good night.